I would think she has shown quite a few narcissistic tendencies in the past, particularly in things like the Oprah Winfrey interview. I think there was a lot of narcissism in that.
Apparently, Tom Bower, the royal author, has now said that he thinks more details will emerge of the bullying that transferred to work for Meghan Markle, where she lasted about 10 minutes. She was questioned about these allegations that Meghan Markle bullied members of staff.
You've seen the polished speeches, the heartfelt interviews, the carefully curated Instagram posts. But what if I told you Meghan Markle's public image of kindness and compassion is unraveling?
By the late Queen to help Meghan acclimatise, she stayed in the role, but then, unfortunately, they couldn't find a replacement for her.
What if I told you that behind palace gates and beyond the cameras, there's a very different story? One not whispered, but allegedly caught on cold, unblinking CCTV? The Duchess of Sussex, the woman hailed as a symbol of modern empathy, could soon be exposed in a way no PR team can spin. But that's not even the craziest part, because the people speaking out aren't bitter critics or tabloid reporters. They're the very staff who once worked closest to her, calling themselves not ex-employees, but survivors.
Two people up in person. What was kind of your reaction to these allegations, Hugo?
Well, I'm afraid I'm not surprised by these allegations because even when
For years, Meghan Markle crafted an image that felt untouchable. She was the modern-day royal who spoke for mental health, women's empowerment, and inclusion, effortlessly mixing Hollywood polish with palace prestige. On the surface, her transition from actress to duchess seemed like a fairy tale reimagined, but behind those designer coats and flawless speeches, palace corridors whispered a different tune. Those who worked for her behind closed doors reportedly developed an internal radar, an almost sixth sense to detect her mood the moment she entered a room. One wrong word, one sideways glance, and according to multiple accounts, the atmosphere could shift from calm to cutting in seconds. Instructions, they said, would go from clear to cruel. Conversations from polite to punishing. And this wasn't just gossip, it was a pattern so pervasive, staff began calling themselves the Sussex Survivors Club. That alone tells you everything you need to know. But here's where it gets darker.
Pleasant. Apparently, the Sussex Survivors Squad had to all find themselves consoling each other.
Royal author Tom Bower now claims the quiet murmurs are about to become deafening. According to him, the palace's greatest fear is no longer speculation. It's security camera footage, CCTV, that allegedly shows Meghan, not during a moment of stress, not having a rough day, but reportedly unleashing a chilling tirade on a female staffer. Imagine that. The Duchess of Dignity snapped mid-rant, caught not just by rumor, but by cold, impartial tape. And according to insiders who claimed to have seen it, it wasn't just a scolding. It was, as one described, a full character reveal. Think less Duchess of Kindness, more Queen of Mean. And this isn't a story about a single bad day or misunderstood comment. Former staff allege this was a culture, a daily game of emotional Russian roulette where you never knew when Meghan's kindness would turn cold.
From very good sources, that there was trouble. There was a time when she was very rude to one of the undergardeners.
Her defenders, of course, rushed to her side when allegations first emerged. They called it sexist, racist, proof that the British establishment couldn't handle a strong, outspoken, biracial American woman. Maybe at first that argument held sway, but as more voices spoke up, as stories emerged from aides who described being humiliated in front of their peers, mocked for their accents, and reduced to tears on an almost weekly basis, public sympathy began to shift. These weren't anonymous online trolls making accusations. These were the people who fetched her flowers, scheduled her meetings, handled her correspondence, the same people she once relied on to keep her empire running smoothly. And what they describe isn't merely demanding leadership. One staffer allegedly called it emotional terrorism dressed in designer coats. And while Meghan smiled for cameras, posed with children, and championed causes about dignity and kindness, those behind the scenes reportedly walked on eggshells.
Probably whine at their staff as much as they whine to the British press, whine to the American press, and whine to everyone else.
And the head gardener went to complain to the Queen, and the Queen went down and ticked her off because the Queen obviously didn't like people being rude to staff. So having heard that story...
Aides tell stories of frantic rewrites. One infamous email reportedly had to be rewritten 14 times before she was satisfied. Another insider claims Meghan could turn her warmth on and off like a light switch, particularly when Prince Harry was nearby. With him, she was polished and poised. Without him, staff said they were treated like they didn't matter at all. A speck beneath her heel, one aide put it bluntly. It all began quietly enough. A new duchess adjusting to palace life, grappling with an ancient institution resistant to change. At first, those who worked under Meghan chalked up her mood swings to the pressures of royal life. After all, the transition from Hollywood to Buckingham Palace wasn't easy. But then came the whispers. Murmurs that wouldn't go away. Staff meetings where aides were reduced to tears. Emails demanding perfection down to the comma, rewritten endlessly while recipients held their breath, fearing the next correction would come with an icy rebuke.
It's not very good with staff or with, people that she's employing or people that she's getting flowers from and things like that. It's just very unattractive.
They're victims of every single terrible thing that's ever happened in the world. So I wish this person the best of luck, because I think they're going to need it.
It wasn't just about being demanding. That was par for the course at the palace. It was the tone, the cruelty allegedly lurking beneath her commands that unsettled even the most seasoned staffers. And then came the phrase that would define their experience, the Sussex Survivors Club. Sounds like a cruel tabloid invention, doesn't it? But it wasn't. This was the actual term palace employees reportedly used to describe themselves. Survivors, not employees, not assistants, but survivors of what they described as daily emotional turbulence. According to insiders, there was a culture of micromanagement and emotional manipulation so severe that some staff reportedly woke up anxious for years after leaving her employ. One former aide claimed Meghan could belittle someone for the tiniest infraction, a late email, a scheduling hiccup, even an accidental double booking, in a way that felt almost surgical. Another insider shared a brutal story of Meghan mocking a British staffer's accent in front of a full room, turning what should have been a professional environment into something chillingly personal.
Like to people who work for you and people that you deal with over the telephone, because otherwise they're going to get very put out, and they're going to, when things start.
Meanwhile, Meghan has failed to find, in more staffing problems, a chief executive officer for her new cooking and lifestyle business.
The staffer, mortified, watched as colleagues laughed, not because they found it funny, but because they felt they had no choice. Most people completely missed this clue, but Meghan's behavior wasn't limited to palace walls. Reports suggest that even after leaving royal life, the same complaints followed her. From her Spotify podcast to Netflix productions, Meghan's post-royal ventures reportedly echoed the very same issues that plagued her time in the palace. A revolving door of staff, sky-high expectations, and an allegedly toxic work environment. According to one LA insider, Meghan didn't want collaborators. She wanted control. Her image management was so precise, so carefully cultivated, that anything less than perfection was seen as failure. And failure, according to these reports, was met not with feedback, but fury. And yet Meghan's defenders argue that this is just the reality of working for a high-profile figure, that all successful leaders demand excellence, that the palace culture was sexist, racist, and inflexible. But here's where it gets insane.
Yeah, Orchard. Apparently, having interviewed several candidates for the position, they've been searching now for 5 weeks, but according to a California-based...
To answer questions by the media, I guess. Well, I think probably quite a lot of actresses have a narcissistic.
Even the late Queen reportedly had to intervene at one point after hearing complaints from a head gardener about Meghan's alleged rudeness. Imagine that. The Queen herself descending into this drama, reportedly ticking off Meghan for how she treated palace staff. That's not the kind of intervention that happens because of mere cultural misunderstandings. That's a red flag, one that even the highest levels of the palace could no longer ignore. Meanwhile, Meghan's supporters worked overtime to frame these stories as unfair attacks, as symptoms of an institution uncomfortable with change. But as one former staffer said bluntly, it wasn't because she was American, it wasn't because she was biracial, it was because of how she treated people. This distinction matters because it pierces the very narrative Meghan spent years crafting, one of a modern woman besieged by tradition and prejudice. Now, her critics say that narrative itself is collapsing under the weight of dozens of eerily similar allegations. What happens next will shock you. But first, you need to understand how these allegations are now threatening not just Meghan's reputation, but the future of the empire she and Harry built together.
Yes, I agree with you. Of course, it can be very stressful leading up to a wedding, but once again, this is when your true character comes out. You know, if you're, we can all be very polite. You know, when things are going well, you see people getting annoyed and getting aggressive and so forth. So once again, I'm afraid it doesn't surprise me. I would think she has shown quite a few narcissistic tendencies.
Behind palace gates, staff learned fast. Loyalty wasn't appreciated, it was demanded. And those who crossed Meghan, even unintentionally, didn't just lose favor, they disappeared. One former insider put it bluntly. In Meghan's world, mistakes weren't tolerated, they were weaponized. And it wasn't just confined to the royal household. As Meghan and Harry rebranded themselves as global celebrities, bringing their polished new empire to Netflix, Spotify, and even lifestyle ventures like American Riviera Orchard, the same problems reportedly followed. According to sources close to her California ventures, staff turnover was rampant. 5 weeks into launching her new lifestyle brand, Meghan reportedly still couldn't hire a CEO. Candidates walked away, spooked by her alleged perfectionism, micromanagement, and unpredictable moods. Only insiders knew about this connection. The dysfunction that plagued her royal life was now bleeding into her commercial ventures. Hold up, this is where it gets insane, because according to those who worked alongside her, Meghan's management style wasn't just tough or demanding, it was chilling.
The Oprah Winfrey interview, I think there was a lot of narcissism in that. So once again, I'm not surprised, I'm afraid. It's just not very attractive. It's not a very attractive characteristic, exaggeration, because that requires quite a lot of effort, doesn't it? But let's assume that
staffers from her podcast team reportedly shared how meetings could turn from brainstorming sessions into critiques that felt deeply personal. One described how Meghan would listen to a creative pitch with polite nods, only to dismantle the presenter with curt dismissals and withering glances. The theme was always the same: perfection or exile. And exile, according to staffers, didn't just mean being fired, it meant being erased, written out of acknowledgements, removed from credits, and in some cases allegedly pressured into signing strict NDAs that barred them from discussing their experience at all. Even Spotify, the platform that welcomed Meghan's highly publicized Archetypes podcast, eventually cut ties after just one season. A senior Spotify executive went so far as to call the couple grifters in a blunt, public remark that sent shockwaves through the industry.
If you're working with a florist and you're employing them, and something goes wrong, express your annoyance at what's so supposedly gone wrong without shouting at them. And I think this particular florist, when I read the article, was saying that even though they very much liked having somebody like Meghan Markle, it was all too much and just not going to deal with her anymore.
Think about that for a second. This was a company that invested millions, a platform eager to associate with royal cachet, but which ultimately walked away. Not quietly, but with a very public rebuke. And industry observers say this wasn't an isolated event. Netflix reportedly shelved her much-hyped animation project, Pearl, without fanfare. And American Riviera Orchard, the lifestyle brand that was supposed to reimagine the wellness space, has yet to find leadership willing to stick around long enough to make it a reality. Millions of fans have no idea that this pattern stretches across almost every venture she's touched since leaving the palace. Meanwhile, Meghan's defenders have been quick to explain away these failures as misogyny, racism, or bad luck. But insiders say it's simpler than that. They claim it's about how Meghan allegedly treats the people around her. A former palace aide offered this chilling summary. "We all wanted to help her succeed, but working for her meant sacrificing your dignity, and no one can sustain that for long." And here's where the stakes skyrocket.
I think this is a very well-researched article, by the way, and something that one should take very seriously. And it comes in response, of course, to her team saying that she's the most wonderful person to work for and so on, which is kind of, I suppose that's a kind of narcissistic thing, and a sort of the fact that she felt the need to do that means that she feels the need to try and...
Tom Bower, the royal author who has exposed palace secrets for decades, now says he believes the most damning evidence hasn't even surfaced yet: the CCTV footage. This isn't gossip, this is reportedly cold, irrefutable proof that Meghan's public persona may be nothing more than a carefully constructed illusion. You think that's bad? Keep listening, because the footage isn't just rumored to exist. According to insiders, it allegedly shows Meghan berating a female staffer, not during a heated crisis, but on an ordinary workday. No excuses, no stressors, just icy disregard. And as Bower suggests, the footage could leak at any time. If that happens, there will be no spin left, no selective editing, no PR-driven counter-narrative that can explain away what's allegedly on that tape. The woman who built her brand on the narrative of being mistreated will face a reckoning where the question isn't whether she was mistreated, it's whether she mistreated others systematically and without remorse. The timing couldn't be worse for Meghan Markle. As rumors of the alleged CCTV footage swirl, her empire looks shakier than ever. What was once billed as a post-royal media revolution, Netflix deals, Spotify exclusives, a lifestyle brand poised to dominate, now resembles a house of cards. And while she's remained publicly silent on the swirling staff allegations, those closest to her know the tension is palpable. Behind the scenes, PR teams are reportedly scrambling. Crisis meetings, strategy memos, damage control efforts aimed at protecting the carefully crafted image of a woman who presented herself as a symbol of kindness and inclusion. But behind closed doors, one royal insider put it bluntly, "The spin won't work this time. If that footage leaks, it's game over." What makes this moment so devastating isn't just the allegations themselves, it's the apparent pattern. Former staff at Archewell, Netflix, Spotify, and even her lifestyle brand reportedly echo the same complaints that once emerged from Buckingham Palace. Toxic work environments, staff reduced to tears, micromanagement disguised as attention to detail, and a boss, they say, whose tone could turn from warmth to ice in a blink. The contradiction is brutal and increasingly impossible to ignore. Meghan, the woman who spoke so passionately about empowering women, mental health, and dignity, stands accused of doing the very things she claimed to fight against. And insiders now say Hollywood executives are noticing too. Behind the scenes, some industry players reportedly describe Meghan as high risk, not because of politics or royal baggage, but because of these alleged behind-the-scenes behaviors that threaten to derail every project she touches. Remember this detail. It becomes crucial later. This isn't just about one disgruntled aide or a misunderstanding over tone. According to multiple sources, it's a culture that developed around Meghan. Staff reportedly adopted radar mode, an almost instinctive ability to sense when her mood had shifted, when the next cutting comment might come. A single misplaced word could reportedly provoke a glare so sharp it left even senior staff frozen. Another staffer described how Meghan could take an innocuous scheduling mishap and transform it into what felt like a public shaming. Conversations that should have been about logistics reportedly became spectacles of dominance, leaving aides feeling small, embarrassed, and trapped. And then there's Harry, silent, absent, a shadow lurking at the edges of this drama. Where was he when these alleged incidents unfolded? Was he defending her? Was he aware? Or was he simply unwilling to confront the uncomfortable truth about his wife's treatment of staff? His absence is more than physical, it's symbolic. As these allegations gain traction, Harry's failure to publicly support, defend, or even comment speaks volumes. In the court of public opinion, his silence increasingly reads as complicity, and that silence may ultimately prove just as damaging as the allegations themselves. The industry tried to bury this information for years, insiders claim, but no more. If that footage emerges, the very foundations of the Meghan and Harry brand will shake. No amount of heartfelt podcast episodes, philanthropic speeches, or glamorous photo ops can counteract cold, hard video evidence. That's the tipping point the Sussexes now face. A reckoning that will play out in the public eye, frame by frame, with nowhere left to hide. And here's the kicker. Those closest to the couple allegedly believe it's not a question of if the footage will leak, but when. The consequences are already rippling through Hollywood and beyond. Insiders say Meghan's reputation as a demanding but misunderstood leader is giving way to a far darker narrative, one that even her staunchest defenders are struggling to explain. Executives who once saw her as a safe bet for lucrative projects are reportedly reconsidering. Brands that once clamored to align with her carefully curated image are now whispering about risk, optics, and the very real possibility that this alleged CCTV footage could become a global sensation for all the wrong reasons. And you can feel the shift everywhere. In social media threads, in cautious entertainment columns, even in the guarded language of PR firms who once championed her every move. The woman who positioned herself as a modern-day symbol of grace and resilience is now facing a challenge no amount of elegant speechwriting can deflect. A narrative no longer in her control. Meanwhile, the staffers who once endured this alleged emotional minefield in silence are finding their voices. Former aides reportedly say the Sussex Survivors Club, once a tongue-in-cheek nickname whispered over late-night wine, now feels like a grim badge of honor, and their stories are finding traction not because they are salacious, but because they are consistent. When too many voices echo the same chilling descriptions, it stops sounding like gossip and starts sounding like truth. The allegations go beyond personality quirks or cultural misunderstandings. These are stories of personal jabs, mocking tones, public humiliation, and alleged micromanagement that bordered on cruelty. And they all point to one devastating contradiction: a woman who preached kindness but allegedly practiced something else entirely behind closed doors. And yet, one haunting question lingers: where was Harry? As the allegations mounted, as the atmosphere reportedly turned toxic, as staff cried behind closed doors and struggled to navigate the emotional turbulence, Harry, the man who once vowed to protect and uplift, was reportedly nowhere to be found. His silence then and now speaks volumes, and that silence might be the final nail in the coffin of their brand, because in the public eye, absence during a crisis looks like tacit approval. The man, once beloved as the rebel prince with a heart of gold, now stands accused not just of failing to intervene, but of allowing this alleged culture to thrive.